Warning, the following video has flashing lights and also includes content that may be deemed inappropriate for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. Sonya-Lynn Mynatt, yes, once again, you have ventured into the fox den to awaken me from my slumber for another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio. Yes, this is going to be fun as always, yet please allow me to attend to something. Much better. A little bit messy. But who cares about some blood splatter on the floor? We'll just have to lap it up later. Without further ado, it is time for the Midnight Society to once again take a walk into the darkness.
Blow, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, bleeding born, fury rise, health ignites, burning rains, endless nights.
When I looked into the eyes of this Dogman, there was nothing. This thing was an apex predator.
Milk road, cracks, shadows morph, fangs pierce, beast reborn, fury rise, health ignites, burning rains, endless nights.
My creatures of the night, yes, welcome back once again to another episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on LordeStarfox Radio, the home and the stomping ground of what? Yes, the Midnight Society. Once again, we sit around the fire to try and figure out what is occurring with the infamous Dogman topic. And guess what? Sonya-Lynn Mynatt has once again decided to come hang out with us. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Thanks for popping in again and hanging out. It's always good to sit down. And long story short, I just got done eating, drinking a big cup of V8 juice, and now I'm sitting down with you, sipping on a ginger beer, which is basically like a more healthy version of ginger ale. I don't like soda, and eating some Cheez-Its.
All right. Taking care of the body. I read all the way there till the end.
Yes. And the
Okay.
Cheez-Its are so good, but you know how it is. They're definitely nothing I would preach to anybody to consistently consume for sure. What's new with you?
Jalapeno ones. Eat the jalapeno ones. They're great. Yeah, I'm sitting here on the porch. It's actually kind of it was supposed to snow in the elevations out here tonight. I'm in East Tennessee, and it's supposed to snow, and it's raining and sleeting right now, off and on. So it's getting chilly. Um, Sitting here on the porch, just enjoying the quiet.
Wow. So you get snow down in Tennessee too? Because I mean, I'm over here near Canada and Maine. So, you know, if you want to talk about snow and cold, it's already pretty chilly outside. Did not know that.
Yeah, like I was, well, we don't usually get it this early in the season, but we got a really big cold front. I think that's moved in from uh this second storm or the second hurricane that came through Florida. It pulled a lot of the warm weather with it when it went. It pulled a cold front this way, so yeah, now we're expecting snow. So
That is hilarious. Yeah, no, I remember one time talking with Harley on the podcast, and he was sitting outside. It was all nice and sunny, and all of a sudden it starts like pouring outside. And I remember I had been watching a Yellow Wolf video a few weeks back where he was, you know, rapping, singing, whatever, outside in what looked to be sunshine and rain, but obviously that could be staged. But either way, he's down in that area. So I messaged Harley, and he's like, "Yeah, no, that happens all the time." And I was like, "Yeah, that's horrible," because up here at least, if you know, hey, it looks pretty good outside, no rain today. You can bring your electronics somewhere, but I would be so not pleased if I just busted out my electronics, looked up, yeah, straight out sunny, and all of a sudden getting smoked with like 10 minutes of like torrential downpours.
Yeah, Harley's right. We get the four, like, especially this time of year, we get all four seasons during the day. We do. We get all four seasons. I mean, it'll be like 80 degrees during the day. It'll be like 39 degrees at night. And we do get a lot of rain with sunshine around here. And it's always the old wives' tale that the devil's beating his wife. That's what everybody says around here when it's sunshiny and it's raining. And I'm just like, okay. uh,
That's so funny. Actually, too, before I throw you the mic with some of the really interesting stuff you're going to toss back at us, have you ever heard about the Kentucky witches? And the reason I asked that is we all know about the LBL and that Kentucky and Tennessee area with the indigenous stuff that occurred and the displacement of them. But now with the Kentucky witches, that supposedly had some beef with some of the more modern settlers who had isolated them as well and casting curses on areas. I just thought that this might definitely bring a little bit more credence to some of the darker things that, the occult specialists in our groups have pretty much come to the conclusion that werewolves and such, can be manifested through some of these cursed books and things. And I don't know. I just found it to be baffling and just wanted to get your thought on that real quick.
yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of it. I'm gonna look it up now for sure because that sounds very interesting because if you wanted to like being a witch would be a great place. The Appalachian Mountains are so full of energy. I
Hmm.
can imagine, and there's different ley lines that run through a lot of places, especially up that way. And so being able to use the energy from the woods, I'm sure that would be like something more powerful because everybody, like you're saying, people manifest certain things. um that's kind of like what I kind of believe what a skinwalker is. Is just like it's kind of like you manifest your own demons, what scares you the most. And I mean, werewolves do scare people, and it's something that's we've been taught since we were, especially this day and age, we're taught as kids. They have all these werewolf movies. um so I can imagine people's fears, like manifesting something like a werewolf because it lives in the woods. You hear coyotes, you start
Hmm.
thinking, oh, it's the wolf man.
Hmm.
So yeah, I can imagine that being like a good spot for anybody who's displaced to be, because the Appalachian Mountains, I can tell you one thing about them: they will take care of you no matter what. If you are good to the forest will be good to you. Um, and there's so many edible plants and useful plants. Anybody that was dabbling in medicine or that could cure somebody or do anything like that was considered a witch. Anybody
Hmm.
who's in nature this day and age is considered a witch. And I'm sure they had to fight for their little peace of mind in the mountains. And I'm sure, and that's the thing, they probably lost because you never really hear the whole story because you only get the winner's perspective of the story. You don't ever get to hear their side. They never give them a chance to write it down before they, burn them at the stake, so to speak, or hang them. So it's kind of interesting. It would be cool to. I'm gonna have to look that up because I don't know, but now I'm going to have to look it up.
No, I'm preach on all that what you said because it is true, and that's what I encourage to anyone about the perspectives. Meaning, if you want to learn about history and things, don't just read the winner's side. I mean, history occurs from different angles, and like my cousin growing up, he worked on like forensics as a detective and such like that, and he'd always tell me, "Remember, kid, there's three sides to every story." And I was like, what do you mean if there's two people? He's like, yeah, yours, theirs, and then the truth. So I always try to really understand that and dive into my research with that aspect of just knowing there's multiple sides. And then from gathering the information, then you can pretty much decipher what would be considered rationally different or pretty much the same interpretation without saying the same words more or less, because I mean we've touched on this before with like the skinwalkers, which is more of a Navajo and also some of the other indigenous cultures. But then the Nordics and the Vikings have their form of skinwalkers, which is straight up creepy and gnarly. And then you have other cultures that, again, are mentioning that. So, also, too, to anyone out there, I don't know if you've seen this as well, because when you brought up the Skinwalker, it's a little bit of an older movie. It's actually for free on YouTube right now called Ravenous. And it dives into the Wendigo aspect a little bit about how this group of individuals gets lost, and one of them, well, yeah, he ends up consuming the others and comes back into this other group of soldiers that wants to know what happened to his group of soldiers he had, yet the hunger is still inside of him, just like they say in the Wendigo, you're always hungry. And it does a really messed up depiction about the psychological aspects. And I encourage you or anyone else to really check that out. But back to what you were saying with the witches, it just brings a little bit more of a twist up in there, because I know there is a big difference between skinwalkers, dogmen, and werewolves and wendigos for sure, 100%. Yet the cases of the werewolves, the occult specialists in our groups have kind of come to the conclusion that these are being manifested from books that are either outlawed or specifically not in publication because they're cursed, etc. And a lot of times people will say these creatures, their breath or them in general smelled like sulfur, which is also reported in a lot of cases with like hellhounds and some of the other paranormal aspect, which I don't really necessarily specialize in that, which is why I have other people that do, and they pass that information on to me. So yeah, it would just make a little bit of sense now that if you have curses being applied from the indigenous culture and the medicine people that were super ticked off by what had occurred, and then you have witches casting curses, maybe in this area we're not actually talking about a dog man, we're talking about a freaking dang demonic werewolf.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, like I said, that I mean, you're talking about the skinwalkers being that something that everybody has their own version of it. So again, your biggest fears manifest, and again, those little things, those little triggers like coyotes and things like that, will set that off, and and it makes you wonder: is that why certain people have? They say they saw Sasquatch. Maybe they manifested what they saw as being a Sasquatch or being a dog man, and then they had a bad encounter with this thing, and then it changed on them.
Super interesting, because we did have a case up here in Maine with some gentleman. Not going to give him any clout because what he did was not intelligent. And I mean, he's accessible. He'll tell a story to anyone, and I've covered it. But he went into a graveyard, and he had been reading some occult things online and not really knowing the true meaning of what he was deciding to chant, just trying to get reactions. And according to him, just like anything else, so unfortunately, this is a one-sided perspective. No one else is there with him, okay? Which is why I do try to dive more into historical events, when you have people like, say, Herodotus and Alexander the Great with some of their inner people with them, or the 11 lumberjacks from Michigan, just where there was one and more perspective than just an individual. But either way, this guy was in the graveyard chanting stuff, and apparently, according to him, it started to get an eerie feel, and some fog came around, and then he doesn't know if these strange tracks were here before or after, but then he starts seeing, these tracks as he's exploring the area, sees a pair of glowing red eyes, sees what looks to be some sort of canine-like werewolf creature. He runs back to his car as it's chasing him, gets in, and according to this guy, ever since then, him and his wife have had some really bad luck, meaning like they had a miscarriage and all kinds of other stuff. But again, I don't have any other way to verify anything that that man said except for himself. I didn't get a chance to speak to his wife, etc. It's just his side of the story.
Well, like you said, like again, manifestation is real. I mean, he could have I mean, being in a graveyard and stuff like that, you start to open up things. Fear is a portal. Fear can, open up things to, I wouldn't necessarily say latch themselves onto you. I think it's just your own fear builds up on you. I don't know how else to describe that. Like if you're constantly in fear of stuff, the only person that can really mess with you or really scare you is you. You're the only person that can, be afraid of certain things. And the more you are afraid of those things, the more they build up on you. And then one bad thing happens, and then another bad thing happens, because I mean, bad things happen. Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. So, I mean, and then you start thinking, oh my God, I've got this bad energy hanging over me. And that really draws in the bad energy because you're thinking that it's already there. And then it just builds up and it keeps building up. And again, it was kind of like your little zombie theory that you told me about. It builds up on, and you think that you have this stuff attached to you, which I mean, it kind of is. It's weighing you down. It's a depression, or it's a, but you can always relate it back to certain stuff like that. Because if you're in a graveyard anyway, if you're doing chants or you're staying on, I mean, you can draw in anything. You can draw in ghosts there, especially because anytime I'm one of those people who believe, like, if you think souls can't be destroyed. So if the soul goes out into the universe and you think about that person, that soul, that person, they will come and visit you. So if you're in a graveyard and you're reading a bunch of graves and you're reading, you're drawing out these energies or these souls from the universe, and they're coming back and they're like, we don't know you. And you wonder why people get haunted, because, these ghosts are coming. They don't know these people. They don't know why they're being disturbed. Like, you hear seance, oh my God, and just be totally upset about it. I mean, I don't know. It's just a theory. But like, again, and he said he started having bad luck. They could have just manifested the rest of it because of the fear they got of the things they were doing then.
So true, my friend, and well stated right there, because it is super interesting, and just the whole aspect of it kind of manifesting. I mean, I had somebody else tell me, again, I didn't speak directly to the person, so it was third party, but they had spoke to the person, and he claimed as he woke up, he saw something that looked to be almost like a mist kind of coming through his wall and then forming into a werewolf looking thing. And again, that is definitely things that we cover in report, but it falls a little bit more into what I'm thinking about as being something that was quote unquote summoned. Because again, I just cover what I believe is a physical entity and gather that stuff. But that's why I have a science team and such, and people that specialize in the occult to bring the aspects of the clarity on it, which is great because I mean, now we've been able to really distinguish the differences between the skinwalker, what a dogman is, and now what a werewolf is. Okay, there's really big differences. So it's super important because it is kind of all more or less a little bit in the same pot of research, because someone that sees a skinwalker could say that they saw a dogman, or someone that sees a dogman could say that they saw a werewolf. Okay, so that's how it's all related. But then when you kind of break it down to the core, like we've spoken about, that's where the differences come into play. Skinwalker never says anything about bipedal raging monster. You're the animal on all fours, obviously very intelligent, magical type powers. Dogman never goes back and forth. Quadrupedal, bipedal, looks like some sort of strange canine-like creature. Fought alongside and against Herodotus, make their own armor, their own clothing. Okay. So it seems to be something that's pretty intellectual. And then now you have a werewolf, which is a manifestation and something that's like a curse that you're applying to someone or yourself. And you're now transforming because of the dark arts. Again, huge different space. So, no, it is really interesting, like you said, but you actually had some other interesting stuff that unfortunately with what's occurring down, in your area with the displacement of people and also animals and such. I've had a few individuals, again, can't really verify. I'm not down there. I can verify that they are in these areas, quote unquote, doing FEMA work and Red Cross type things and looking for people and claiming that they've heard strange things, found really savage like wounds on some of the bodies they've recovered deep in the forest. And that a lot of these people don't want to go out at night. Again, I'm not there though, so it is interesting, but you are actually in that area, and I felt like that might tie into what you had wanted to speak about as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it does. They are in this area because, I mean, the place that got hit the hardest was, like outside of it wasn't just Asheville. Everybody thinks of Asheville because it's just a place that, it's a popular place, a tourist destination or whatever. But the places between Asheville and here in like where Harley lives, like in the Newport and Cosby area and the Smoky Mountains and that general vicinity, we know there's things there. We know um, we know there's a giant peripheral rainforest right outside of Asheville that is just full of Sasquatch. Like I can tell you that right now, and it makes you wonder. Like um, I know there's a lot of really crazy things that are going on in those towns right now because of just the way, just how long it's been since they got help because they couldn't get people in there, because the roads are, I mean, they're gone. I mean, there's no roads into these places, which is crazy. um and it's just people just didn't know what to do. It's they were shell shocked. And um so there's a lot of animals that are displaced, not just people's pets, but there's a lot of wild animals and things because of the mudslides. And you're going to have rogue bears and things like that out in the area. But there's definitely those things, there, and there's always that possibility that could happen. But it makes you wonder if they're like other animals. Like other animals get the sense, a lot of the time, to, like, if you looked at the bird map, they have a migratory bird map that you can follow. And when the hurricane came in, when Helene came in, you could see where all the birds went. And it literally, the line of where the birds had decided to, like, stop, this is good enough, was like the line of the, like, of the worst of the storm. So some birds can handle it, some went on further into land, but they all went. So, like, if you needed a good route to, like, get out of the hurricane, you should follow the bird map, because the bird map's going to save your life. Because the birds know, so do the other animals know. Do the Sasquatches, do the Dogmen in the Smokies, in these areas in the Appalachians? Did they feel like this was coming? I mean, did they, you know, it was a weird storm. The storm was like, even the people in Florida talked about the storm coming in, and it was different because they didn't get a lot of rain in Florida. I have a mountain separating me and the other side of my county, and I am 2 counties over from where, like, Harley lives. And uh and they got massive flooding. And like, Newport was, like, underwater. The mountain that separates our counties, like, the eye of the storm come right over us, but we didn't get the flooding. The other side of the mountain did, but I didn't. I have a huge creek in front of in my front yard. And if we'd have got rain like the other side of the mountain did, I couldn't imagine what I would be left with. And I can't imagine what those people went through. But having, like, a lot of them had dam failure. That's really what got them. So, and then the mudslides. So that's not something that you would expect, even it being hurricane season. Um, it's not something that you would expect, a mudslide. So, where do these creatures go? Where did the Sasquatch go? How do they know? I'm like, I don't know, even to myself. Like, I know that the family of Sasquatch that live near me, I know, like, in colder weather and stuff, they go and usually stay in the mountains. They don't usually come down very often. They go up higher in the mountains, which people are like, "Oh, it's colder up there." I'm like, "Yeah, but if there's snow on the ground down here, it's harder for them to get around without leaving a mess of prints." So they go somewhere. They go and they don't come back out until it's, the snow's off the ground usually. And that's just usually. But so um but you just don't know how these or these cryptids are displaced. And yeah, and there's these people, they're having to take these back roads that cut through no man's land just to get to some of these houses in some of these towns. So they're going through parts of the woods that are probably people don't go in. I mean, you get the occasional hunter, that goes in there, and they probably don't mess too much with. I always think that the cryptids have, like, a sixth sense about people with guns, so they don't, mess around too much if they don't have to. Um, but, like, they're having to take these backwoods trails into these towns, so and it's quiet. There's no lights, there's no electricity, there's no cars, there's no roads. So I can't imagine how quiet and dark it is out there, and imagine what, they're in these, like I said, these backwoods trying to get, through the mountains, that because there's no, I mean, even the old trails are gone. Even the first highways that were out there are gone. It's crazy.
Really is some crazy stuff right there for sure. And it really makes me think, I guess, potentially what could happen. There are a lot of times, like you said, where animals pick up on stuff and insects way before people do and will move themselves from areas. Yet, people would like to claim we're so aware of things, but if you look at Pompeii, well, they pretty much either had no clue, didn't care, or yeah, were literally just caught off guard. And well, unfortunately, we all know the end story of that. Their disfigured expressions are literally
Yeah,
dust forever. So it makes me think of with Mount St. Helens, though, same thing potentially.
yeah,
I don't
because
know.
they had in the Mount St. Helens, like they had, and it wasn't just that, they had different stories from different people who did different jobs,
Hmm.
and the stories come out at different times. And the one guy, he was even told, he was said, we were debriefed, about the situation. They weren't really told what was going on, but they were told, hey, listen, this is what this is. Obviously, it's a Bigfoot. Obviously, it's a Sasquatch. They are real. They do live in these parts of the woods. Um, and if you lived out here, would you want to be messed with? Would you want these creatures to be messed with? He goes, you're taking a vow of silence anyway. You can't say anything because we're putting you under orders or whatever, not to say anything. But like, he goes, in 30 years, he goes, when it doesn't matter anymore, because he goes, in 30 years, these people will know. They'll know that they're there, and it'll be time to tell your story. And that's what a lot of them did, they were debriefed like that. And so that's, like the one guy, he wasn't even in like the army, he was in the Air Force, and he said that they, hooked him up with a gun, and he was like, I'm in the Air Force. I didn't even think I'd see a gun again. he was like he was like, and then they hooked him up with a hat, and they made him go and guard these, these Sasquatch bodies. And
Jeez.
yeah, and the Sasquatch bodies, they knew that's what they were, but again, they were told, just he was a major hiker and camper all the time, and he said it didn't stop him from ever. He said his life didn't change because he knew they were real. He just knew at one point, he wanted to tell his story, because when Mount St. Helens, they didn't really have a warning. That place is like, it's on the verge of eruption all the time anyway. Or like Yellowstone, it's just, it could erupt at any time. It really could. They have things that could, measure the levels or whatever and say, hey, this is it. This is it's happening. There'll be warning signs.
No, that really also reminds me too of the two Skinwalker stories that I've been introduced to. One about, yeah, there was actually, again, more than one witness here, which was pretty gnarly. The forest fires that were occurring a little while ago in California. These groups of Marines and reserves were sent all around to try to, set up areas to help the firefighters just control the fire themselves, etc. So this group set up, met some of their friends deeper in an area. We're supposed to set up a generator, a light. So they, both squadrons get out of their Humvee. So there's like two Humvees here. So there's, like I said, a numerous amount of people. They're setting up the light, the generator, just talking. All of a sudden, they hear some strange voice in the forest that is calling out the leader of one of the groups, who's literally standing right with the rest of them talking. So they all stop talking and they hear it again. And the dude's like, what the frig? And they're all like, what the frig? So he turns around and they all raise their light and weapons and start to kind of look in the area. And off in the forest, apparently, is this super skinny, decrepit looking, creepy wolf thing that looked to be like smiling and trying to lure them into the forest. And then you have what's happening still currently to Nuxium, aka Brother Nature, who's the tracker for us here at the North American Dogman Project, up in Yosemite and an area near Cascade Lake and such where he was staying. There was all of a sudden some skinwalker activity after he was tracking this thing, and it's been harassing him ever since. But he believes with some of the forest fires that were occurring down south in California and in the northern Mexican area had pushed this thing all the way up the mountain, and that's how it ended up in his area. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it does this. I mean, you would have to think that it would displace them. I mean, they've moved on. We've had to put, there's humans putting farmland down and through the centuries, and then there's people building cities. And so we pushed them to these mountain places. So they have to be pushed back further so that, they are. But I mean, with it wiping out that area, it's not displaced them for long. It's, and I hate to say it in this way, and I don't mean it in a bad way, like, but it's helping them, take their land back or where they live, where they don't have to be so encroached upon. But then, a lot of families lost everything they owned, had, towns are gone, but so, there's, it's sad. It's sad, but I'm sure that they've been here for centuries. They can take care of themselves. The forest can take care of itself. The earth will take care of itself. Um, but yeah, you get a lot of these like different energies in the woods up here, and and you never know. I mean, like I said, these things are um you get a lot of like the younger Sasquatches and stuff, and they're curious. And again, you're making these back roads, trying to take these back ways into these little towns, so they're probably getting messed with this time of year because um the Sasquatches are really active this time of year. I mean, between like August and November, it's you know they are really active. They're down out of the mountains. I don't know. Maybe people are more outside because it's really good camping weather. It's been really hot this summer, so it was really hard to stay outside.
Sure. Some definitely interesting stuff again right there. And before we let you get back to your busy schedule, our science team actually has been churning up a hypothesis that might be hitting theory range here sooner than later, like you were saying about being here for quite a long time. Just think for 1 second. Again, this is just a hypothesis, but imagine if other people have said this, that some of these great cultures, like the Egyptians, which you did have Anubis and such, and they had help building whatever it was they were building. Let's keep in mind, though, there's magnetic poles and things, and there are ways to accomplish what it is they accomplish. So, again, this is just a hypothesis. But imagine if the Greeks, right? What if they inherited their cities and those type like structures from the cynocephali? Because at a point in time, the cynocephali were a very prevalent culture, okay? But every culture throughout history falls. Yet it is documented that they were a very successful and prevalent culture in the mountains. But now, say their culture falls, okay, and they are seen sporadically now, which would explain why, you have some of these sightings with them wearing clothing and extra animal furs and carrying hatchets, etc. But just, yeah, imagine if that's where the Greeks and things got these extravagant buildings that are still standing. Like I said, it's just a hypothesis, but it's really interesting for sure.
There's a theory here in America that there were cities here. They were talking about like the cities of the World's Fair Park, or not the World's Fair Park, but the World's Fair, the site where the World's Fair went on. It was a huge city. It was like they tore it all down. But why would they build a city to tear it all down just for the World's Fair? It didn't make sense. And a lot of these old buildings and a lot of these old places, they said that they were here before we got here. And I mean, there's cities, underground cities here. Knoxville, there's a
Hmm.
city around Knoxville. Um, yeah, and I mean, there's so much that we just don't know, that we're not told. So it's just, I mean, everything's a theory at that point. But
100%. But I just found it to just be really interesting when they were talking about that. And again, like you said, I mean, until things are really clarified, everything is just, if it's done properly, which it should be, theories come after hypothesis, then, you need evidence to create those things. So, yeah, that's why we try to be selective on the terminology we use about that, which is hypothesis, meaning, yes, we understand that it's not, we don't have evidence really to support that to an extent to call it a theory, but we do have some interesting stuff. So, figured
yeah,
on a final kind of note to maybe, intrigue you a little bit more and give you some more stuff to potentially dive into. But I do appreciate you popping in tonight and hanging out with us, because I know you are super busy and unfortunately right down in the heart of what's occurred with some of the madness down south with the storms and such. So it is always good to sit down and pick your mind for sure, friend.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate you letting me ramble on about different things.
No, it's good. I mean, you always come in with your own research and things to talk about, which is excellent. And I do encourage, everyone when they do sit down to bring in topics to speak about, because it really opens up a lot more and, hopefully tries to answer more questions than creating questions, which is what I'm all about. So, no, I do look forward to collaborating again here soon for sure.
Yeah, I'll be looking up the witches thing. It's spooky season, so it's a good time to talk about that.
Thank you for everyone who once again stopped by tonight for this episode of Midnight Lycanthropy here on Star Fox Radio. If you do enjoy my content, please like, subscribe, share, and even comment. Feed the algorithm, and I will catch you